Okay, so good morning to everyone. We are now live for Community for Food Security Partnerships Against Hunger. So maybe we'll wait a few moments to get some of our participants in. But again, we are live on Facebook also and on YouTube. So good morning, everyone. I am Ian Agatep from the Quezon City Sustainable Development Affairs Unit, and I will join you this morning as we delve further and understand partnerships to better forge food systems and food security in our country. So this webinar is brought to you by University of the Philippines, CIFAL Philippines, United Nations Institute for Training and Research, and this is in partnership with the Sustainable Development Affairs Unit Office of the City Mayor of the Quezon City Government. This morning, we actually have a lineup that will truly see what it means to work as a community and have partnerships across public, private, and civil society that works for food security and, as you know, SDG 2, Zero Hunger. So as you tune in, we are also live via Facebook. Follow us at CIFAL Philippines and Quezon City Sustainable Development Affairs Unit and Grow QC. Don't forget our hashtags, hashtag Community for Food Security, hashtag Partnerships Against Hunger, and hashtag GrowQC. So to start our morning and get the ball rolling, I'd like to introduce the director of UP-CIFAL Philippines. So she is currently the director of UP-CIFAL and the UP Diliman Extension Program in Pampanga. She also served as Vice President of Public Affairs under the administration of former UP President Alfredo Pascual and a Dean of the UP National College of Public Administration and Governance. Let us all welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Edna Ko.
Thank you very much, Ian, for the introduction. And before anything else, I'd like to greet everybody, those who are following us, a pleasant good morning. In the Philippines, it's Monday morning. And I'd like to, first of all, thank our co-organizers for this occasion. Of course, we have the Quezon City Sustainable Development Goals Affairs Office, and our guest for today, the World Food Program, as well as none other than the center of attention of everyone, the Community Pantry Starter. And today he is, the Community Pantry is represented by Michael Non, who is part of the lead team for the Community Pantry. Let me begin by saying that community pantry, as the word or as the phrase implies, seem to be a very particular concept that has arisen or grown from the Philippines. But if you take a look at it, literally, it means food bank. It means also a community fridge. It's a source of food, in other words. And what we have in the Community Pantry webinar actually is unraveling what is in it, who is behind it, how did it grow, what does it offer. But on the part of the United Nations Institute for Training and Research and the CIFAL Philippines, we also would like to look at Community Pantry as exactly swak na swak po in responding to what we call Sustainable Development Goal number 2, Zero Hunger. And if we further look at SDG 2, Zero Hunger, particularly target 2.1, it says all of us should help end hunger and ensure access by all people, particularly the poor and people in vulnerable situations. And this is exactly what Community Pantry has turned the magic to us, that it is hitting target 2.1 of the Sustainable Development Goal number 2. In addition, we can also look at it, and this is what this particular seminar is about. We want to bring everyone to the table. We want to enlarge the concept of community pantry through SDG 17 by partnering with everyone and all sectors to achieve SDG 2. And so in the Philippines, if I may go back to the community pantry concept, the idea is to provide the essential supplies, food particularly, but over time it has expanded to include essential supplies to have sanitation and hygiene materials available to people. The spirit behind the community pantry is that people should take and should really take as much as they need, but these are the essential ones. But the other part of the equation is that community pantry is also about giving. It is giving what you can afford to give, to donate to the community pantry so that the community pantry can continue to serve as many population as much as possible. Started in April 2021, it has grown to a total of 6,700 pantries all over the country. In other words, it did not only inspire our spirit, it also grew as in number. And I am beginning to think that from a community-based initiative, this one is springing up to be a movement of all Filipinos that has already shown a snowball effect. Without further ado, I'd like uh, to now give in to our uh, our co-organizers, our speakers, and get more time to listen to everyone speak about what they think about community pantry and where do we see this moving forward. And so once again, thank you very much to our co-organizers, the Quezon City local government, our, of course, community pantry original initiator, the World Food Program country office in the Philippines. And thank you so much to everyone who are here to listen to us. May our tribe increase. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ko, for those wonderful opening remarks. And again, this is all about partnerships that can be forged in any sector of our country and any sector of our society. So now on to our main event. For our first speaker, this person is actually no stranger to me. In fact, he is my boss. Mr. Velasco, or Emmanuel Nonong QF Velasco, is the head of the Quezon City Sustainable Development Affairs Unit under the Office of the City Mayor. He is also the co-chairperson of the Quezon City Food Security Task Force and the action officer of the Grow QC Food Security Initiative. Under the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, Nonong developed and executed an agri-entrepreneurship training program called the Farm Business School. It is a program adopted by the Philippine government to the Department of Agriculture, the Agricultural Training Institute. So let us welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nonong Velasco.
Hi, good morning to all. Ian, thank you for the kind introduction. On behalf of Mayor Joy Belmonte, first of all, I'd like to thank our partners, UP-CIFAL, and our fellow participants for today for this opportunity. We are very thankful for the opportunity to introduce what Grow QC is all about, the initiative of the local government of Quezon City towards food security. And we look forward in engaging the youth, the academe, both private and fellow government agencies towards achieving food security. As mentioned by Edna, the community pantry is actually identified in the international scene as food bank or the community bridge. But what's most important is that we have our own version, and the most important part of it is that we go back to the spirit of who we are as Filipinos, and that's called the Bayanihan spirit, which is very much needed when we achieve these sustainable goals, particularly SDG 17. So without further ado, thank you for the opportunity for me to introduce what the food security initiatives of Quezon City uh, is all about. So allow me to share my screen. Okay. So as mentioned, I am the head for the Sustainable Development Affairs Unit of the local government of Quezon City. We believe that we're the first local government in the whole Philippines to have established such. And this was actually recommended by the United Nations in order to achieve food security, is to create actually a unit within government, both in the national and local governments, to talk about the issues of food security. And when the pandemic hit, our mayor actually um, thought of putting up a task force, particularly addressing food security. As the pandemic hit, for Metro Manila, this actually has resulted in the loss of lives. And from pre-pandemic, the issues were hidden hunger. It's actually real hunger. And the latest statistics from DOST FNRI for April 2021 is that 61% of Filipinos have actually experienced moderate to severe insecurity, where the hunger incidence is actually for the past couple of years has only been at 8%. So the pandemic has actually shown the problems of hunger and the situation that in the Philippines we're actually food insecure. Um, However, there are great initiatives, as we will talk about one, which is private led, which is the community pantry. And we are very inspired by it. And at the same time, we would like to share and to get others to know that there are public initiatives such as Grow QC, and our currently launched or recently launched community feeding program. Um, so again, the creation of the Food Security Task Force happened at the height of the first lockdown, when food security was hunger or the pandemic was hit hit the Philippines, and we had our first lockdown. Our Mayor Joy Belmonte, issued out Executive Order 32, which is the establishment of the Quezon City Food Security Task Force, which is a COVID-19 recovery plan to address food security and nutrition by promoting urban agriculture, the development of zones for agricultural use, and value adding, which is the food zones. And the very first result here is a partnership with the Department of Agriculture, our national agency, in jointly promoting urban agriculture in Metro Manila, which is for DA, it's called the Plant initiative. The Food Security Task Force is an interdepartmental and multi-task force unit. It's composed not only of several departments within Quezon City, excuse me, but also legislative representation and sectoral representation. The objectives of the Food Security Task Force actually hits on initially there were 5 SDGs. But now that it's been a year, we've actually seen 6 sustainable development goals that it can meet. And that's SDG 2, zero hunger, the creation of decent work and economic livelihood. Our economic leaders have already pointed out that the fastest way to recovery is anchoring activities centered on agriculture and food. Being in the lockdown for more than a year is like being put into jail. And that's why we need to look into the health and well-being, not only on the nutrition side, but really about mental health of our citizens. Um, as I will share later on, our urban gardens or urban farms within the city, we are confident that we can create models of sustainable cities and communities. And of course, improving agriculture and its food systems actually has a high impact on climate change. But food security is not something that you can create overnight. It's a long-term vision and a long-term goal. And no way that we can actually do it alone as local government. Food security can only be achieved through partnerships. So I think what's most important is that we need to define exactly what food security is all about. And we follow the International Food and Agriculture Organization of the United States in defining exactly what it means. And there are four um, criteria or pillars for food security. One is availability and access. And this is where the community pantry actually quickly addresses, as well as the other interventions of the local government that I will share. But we need to push the agenda into a higher discussion, where in which utilization, which is about safety, uh, and nutrition should come in. So food security cannot be talked about alone. It's actually food security and nutrition and its stability. So I think that's the question that we all have. How can we put interventions um, such that how can we create these interventions on hunger such that it is sustainable? um, as the food security task force started to work, we actually created the framework, and the framework for this is anchored on two pillars: the promotion of urban agriculture in Quezon City, and the improvement of what we call food systems, or yung pagdaloy ng pagkain, the in and out of food in Metro Manila. Let's realize that we are in the city and we cannot possibly produce all the food requirements of our citizens. And that's why partnerships with provinces, those that are really geared to produce food, is essential. So under urban agriculture, we saw the need for home food security. This is where the establishment of home urban gardens, um, and then the creation of community gardens, and I'll present this more. Now we're moving towards institutional forms. Initially, schools were identified because they had the large open spaces. However, they were very busy last year with the adjustment to the new normal, which is online education. However, now that it is ensured that, or at least it's clear again that there won't be face-to-face classes, there are schools right now, particularly the Quezon City University, where in which they're engaging urban agriculture. And then the development of agricultural zones within the city. Under food trade and processing, again, the inflow of food. So food, how do we improve the food trade? How do we rethink the way food is brought into the city? This is where digital agriculture would play a big role. And the repurposing of available spaces. We have a lot of idle lands, and later on, I'll share with you the efforts of Quezon City with that. And this is where the topic today comes in: partnerships. Okay, it's very important that we create partnerships in putting this together. To create economic value, we need to do value adding and processing of these foods. Um, because of this framework and the efforts of Quezon City, the United Nations through C40 has actually been documenting our efforts and of Quezon City building food and nutrition resilience within our city. So allow me to share the video that they created with our efforts for you to understand more our efforts in Quezon City.
Welcome to Eat at Home, the newscast of the global food transformation. Eat at Home is a series of broadcasts and interactive side sessions on food systems transformation toward the United Nations Food Systems Summit in 2021. Now, amidst a global pandemic, the flaws and the vulnerabilities in our global food systems have been urgently brought to our attention. Fixing food has never been more important. Over the next 4 episodes, we'll explore food production that protects and restores nature. We'll address how farmers and food producers can get a fair share. And finally, access to healthy and safe nutrition for all. These are some of the stories we're going to serve you today. Let's take a closer look into how one of the C40 cities, Quezon City in the Philippines, is building back better.
Our greetings from Quezon City, Philippines comes with sincere wishes for everyone's safety. While we are living with the hope that the global health crisis will end soon, we Filipinos are counting on our resiliency as a country to overcome the challenges of these unprecedented times. When our first COVID positive case in Quezon City was confirmed in March 9, the city government began mobilizing various efforts to ensure the health and safety of our millions of residents. One of our foremost concerns was ensuring that the families in our communities have sufficient supplies of food, and this was a monumental task. We, along with other LGUs in our own areas, provided food relief packs, but these were mostly composed of rice, canned goods. With vegetables in short supply, we thought of empowering our residents to plant their own sources of good nutrition. This initiative has its roots from our Joy of Urban Farming program, which has been running for more than 10 years. The beauty of urban agriculture is that it not only addresses hunger issues, but it has brought communities closer together. In partnership with our Department of Agriculture, the Quezon City Food Security Task Force has initiated its Grow QC campaign. Aside from urban gardens, other Grow QC action plans are: number 1, the establishment of community soup kitchens; number 2, vegetable nurseries; and number 3, the introduction of aquaponic technologies as an alternative livelihood for our people. We aim to be a truly green city, one that also fosters stronger community growth and development. We have also distributed electronic tricycles, or e-trikes, as a replacement to the community tricycles. We have banned the use of single-use plastics since last year, and this is now inculcated in our residents' mindsets. Since Quezon City is blessed with verdant green spaces, we aim to expand and improve these areas by creating more green belts. We will remain steadfast in our commitment to achieve more for a healthier Quezon City.
So as mentioned in the video, there were only 3 out of the 7 action points that the Grow QC initiative is actually pursuing. Last year in 2020, what we focused on was immediate response. So this was the giving out of seed starter kits together with the partnership with the Department of Agriculture. However, now we've moved into production of seedlings through vegetable nurseries. The development of community model farms and gardens, this takes some time. We cannot make urban gardens overnight. But later on, I'll show you what we have been able to do. Aquaculture as an alternative to meat. We know that even prior to the pandemic, the Philippines was hit by the African swine fever. And apparently, we have a lot of informal backyard hog raisers. And now the aquaculture is something that we're introducing as an alternative. In order to complete the loop for urban agriculture, we've actually launched simultaneous or just a little bit behind the popularity of the community pantry, the creation of community soup kitchens. And the difference here is that we are connecting our urban farms to these community feeding. For the food systems, we are doing food trade or an improvement in the food trade. Currently, we're still discussing on the creation of a special urban development zone, particularly for urban agriculture. And lastly, the value adding of these products. So this food security campaign of this food security effort of Quezon City is called the Grow QC, kasama ka sa pag-unlad sa pagkain, kabuhayan at kalusugan. So for our international audience, pag-unlad means progress. Pagkain, kabuhayan and kalusugan primarily means the development or creation of food, creation of livelihood for the improvement of health. So all of this is geared towards recovery because of what the pandemic has done. So in a nutshell, again, what really Grow QC or food security is about, let's watch this video.
Urban farming bolsters the city's need for food security and sustainability by cultivating farmland to grow crops. This program aims to have a sufficient supply of food for its residents, most especially in this time of pandemic, where unemployment and starvation hits them hard. There are numerous urban farming sites in the city where people can buy fresh vegetables directly from the farm. Also, our committed farmers was able to earn extra income for their family, and at the same time help the city by providing nutritious vegetables for community feeding program. To succor the farmers, the Quezon City government conducted a training seminar to establish a cooperative, wherein all the profits from the farm will be safeguarded and grow. Urban farming's exemplary success simply proves that mutual cooperation within the local government and its people will lead us to cope up easily in this afflicting time.
So, as a highlight, the Grow QC campaign has been 1 year already. And this is something that I recently reported to our mayor. We've actually distributed more than 50,000 seed starter kits and seedlings in order to promote home gardening and the creation of community gardens. Currently, we have identified 166 urban gardens and farms of different sizes. The largest urban farm in the whole of Metro Manila is located at Quezon City with a minimum size of 7 hectares. And we're monitoring 7 community model farms, which showcases modern urban agriculture technologies. For aquaculture, we've released more than 23,000 fingerlings and expect to harvest about 4 tons of fish in a few months from now. Just this May, or April and May, we've already started our community feeding, centering on the most food vulnerable sectors or barangays in Quezon City. And we've fed 1.78 million individuals through this program. And through our partnership with DA through the Kadiwa food trade, we've brought food produced by our farmers closer to the consumers. And we've moved at least 16 tons worth of assorted vegetables, fruits, meats, etc. We've enacted 2 laws, particularly EO 32 and Ordinance 2972, which is an amendment of the idle land tax, which encourages now open spaces to be converted to urban gardens, and they will get a tax incentive. And for the topic of the day, with partnerships, we wouldn't be able to achieve all of this without partnerships. And as of today, we have 14 partnerships with 16 memorandum of agreements. One of our partners, of course, is UP-CIFAL. Since our topic is about partnerships for sustainability, allow me to show a video of how we engage groups to do volunteerism and partnerships.
Ito yung pagkakataon para makaikot sa komunidad, makita kung ano yung mga pwedeng o yung mga sitwasyon.
During pandemic, and we all have these problems na nawala ng trabaho ng iba.
A time of war. Kung hindi pa rin na-accept ng tao, nasa gera po tayo ngayon. And it's one of the most difficult challenges of war. Kasi invisible yung kalaban natin.
A hungry man is an angry man. Yung gutom na tao ay maaaring galit na tao.
So 3 pillars na kailangan ma-address. Pagkain, kabuhayan, at kalusugan.
Actually, a call center agent, this is my time to share or give back to the community. Kahit na ito matanda na, masasakit na yung mga buto at mga likod. Since meron tayong bagong project na susuportahan, which is the food security of Quezon City, naisip namin na mag-donate mga equipment.
Namumulat tayo sa kahalagahan ng ating pagkakaisa, the bayanihan spirit during the pandemic.
Let's go QC! Let's go QC! Go QC!
Ito yung pagkaka
So to discuss a little bit of each action point in with regard to partnerships. During the first lockdown, we thought that individuals need to have their own food at the home. So this is home food security. So in partnership with the Department of Agriculture, we have been able to give out all of these seed starter kits, and there are communities. Now 53,000 is very small compared to our 4 million population. But this is again where partnerships can come in, such that we're talking to private sectors now to contract grow these vegetables. For example, a malunggay nursery. So we can donate these malunggay seedlings to be planted all over Quezon City. Malunggay or moringa is considered a superfood. In the establishment of community farms, I just want to focus on New Greenland, Bagong Silangan, which is the largest urban farm in Metro Manila, at 7 hectares in a minimum and engaging more than 100 urban farmers. This was achieved through the partnerships of Department of Agrarian Reform, Department of Agriculture, TESDA, QCLGU, the local barangay of Bagong Silangan, sectoral religious groups such as Bread Society, and the New Greenland farmers themselves, who is now a cooperative, the first urban agriculture cooperative in Metro Manila. For other urban farms, we have partnerships with the DSWD. They have a food share program where they supported the urban farms, the urban farmers by providing food support while they're establishing the farms. We have several partnerships with homeowners associations. We have a partnership with the Archdiocese of Novaliches, and we will be launching the Sharon Farm soon. We have a partnership with DANR for recycling, for inputs, the Sangguniang Kabataan, and even the Seed Association of the Philippines. As you saw in the video, we have partnerships with the Army Reserves. Given the pandemic, there's limited movement, and so there are only particular sectors which are allowed to move. And this is where it becomes a tricky thing for the local government. Who should we allow to move and not to move? There are groups such as Rotary and JCI that have adopted and helped out some of these community farms. NSTP, subject to the approval of the youth moving around, but they are actually helping out through marketing and promotion of this advocacy. The Quezon City University also is doing the same. And we are now talking to private companies such as Concentrix in order to establish new urban farm models within the city. The promotion of aquaculture and aquaponics is in partnership with the DA Bureau of Agricultural Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, and as well as United Nations Food and Agriculture, several hog raiser groups who are severely affected by the ASF and again affected by the COVID. Of course, our local barangays. This is almost simultaneous, but I think overshadowed by the community pantry. We actually launched our mobile kitchen and community feeding. And we do have private partners and groups such as the Council of Development of Volunteer Leaders, wherein which we partner together in order to provide food in a safe and orderly manner. Just want to show that feeding is something which is something that we've been doing in the past. So what are we doing differently? We're focusing on nutrition. Prior to the pandemic, there is already statistics of severe stunting and wasting among Filipinos, and that's why we've created a group together with DOST, UNFAO, our city nutrition, to come up with a guidebook or recipe book where in which healthy food can be affordable, and it promotes uh, local vegetables that can be grown within our urban farms, such as talinum, which is a local spinach, our local amaranth colitis, malunggay, saluyot, and alugbati. And what's nice is that this is now being used um, in our feeding programs. And this is actually something that's recommended by our IATF, Cabsec Nograles on Zero Hunger, where in which we need to connect our feeding programs, our government feeding programs, to our farmers as much as possible. So for Quezon City, that is actually our urban farms. And last but not the least, the food trade. Uh, we wouldn't be able to bring affordable, fresh food closer to our citizens without the partnership with DA. DA Amas with the Kadiwa ni Ani at Kita. Um, our topic today really centers on Quezon City's community pantry. And first of all, we're very proud that this initiative, this community initiative, started in Quezon City in Maginhawa. Um, in April 21, we've monitored that out of the 300 community pantries, 70 are actually from Quezon City. And as we were given an update earlier, there are already 168 community pantries in Quezon City out of 535 community pantries all throughout the Philippines. And I think there are some uh, models outside the Philippines already. So how has Quezon City supported this? And we've done this in a very quiet manner. Um, as soon as the Maginhawa Community Pantry came in, the Patricia Non had conversations with mayor already, and one of the key factors that we can provide as Quezon City is security. Okay, they've asked help in organizing the lines, and therefore the task force disciplina and our traffic enforcers were freely deployed in that area so that we can follow health protocols and safety. So that's the other one. We fully support the community pantries, and we still want to ensure safety. And quietly, our government gave out masks and shields, and at the same time disinfection. We have these capacities, and I believe there were other forms of assistance such that as the repacking, as the volume of donations came, the repacking and manning of some of these community pantries were provided for by the Quezon City government. So first of all, I had several conversations with the mayor about this, and this is an act of kindness, and this is something that we should encourage. And the governance of mayor is something that is inclusive and empowerment. And that's why we support all forms of community-based activities where the intent is actually to help others, okay? Especially during this time of crisis. The mayor, who's the chairperson of the Food Security Task Force, realizes that in order to achieve food security, the lifting cannot be the local government alone. And this is where partnerships come in. We all have to do our part. And the mayor specifically said that it doesn't support the sowing of fear, okay, and disagrees fully with the actions of some of our fellow units in government who is discouraging a very inspiring community effort. And therefore, also the mayor, after much debate with some of the heads, that at the end of the day, we do not require permits. There is no need for regulation in this effort because this is a community initiated effort in order to address the pandemic. However, the appeal of our mayor is really to do close coordination with the barangay. And if the barangay is not cooperative than to go directly to the local government, particularly the mayor's office. And the only appeal and the only thing that we want to do is for us to follow health protocols, okay, and follow the laws. I believe there was a time that the citizens of Quezon City lined up earlier than the curfew. And though by law, they have violated a law and are therefore should be penalized, the mayor, because of understanding of the need of people, particularly in the second lockdown, they've lost jobs and they're hungry. You know, she waived all this penalties and just gave a warning. However, we are local government and we need to uphold the law. And last but not the least, we want to thank the community pantries and all your donors. Because of this effort, they actually bought from our urban farms. And that's our appeal, that if we are giving away food anyway, why don't we support our local urban farms as well? And we want to thank the initiatives of the community pantries, because our farmers in our urban model farms have actually increased sales, because for food to be safe and healthy, you want it closest in terms of source. Okay. Also, the Kadiwa model, many have bought there because the prices of goods are actually below. So even if you make food available, meaning it's there and affordable, if there's no job and you don't have money, you don't have access to it. And that's why the community pantries, we believe, is a very contributes a lot in achieving food security for our city. And so, as a parting thought, our appeal is for us to support local, support community pantries, support urban farms, and even support community feeding. And together, we can achieve, through partnerships, food security. With that, thank you very much, and God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nono. Again, that was truly a holistic work of Quezon City with regards to food security. For those who just tuned in, you're listening to Community for Food Security. This is Partnerships Against Hunger. Follow us at CIFAL Philippines in Quezon City Sustainable Development Affairs Unit in Grow QC. As Nonong mentioned earlier, again, let's support our partnerships that is present both locally and internationally, and let's not disregard any acts of kindness towards how we can support each other as a society. So for our next speaker this afternoon, for the past month, you've actually seen the growth of community pantry in the Philippines, actually, and with only just a few days after its anniversary, if I remember it correctly, this cannot be denied that the phenomenon that the entire initiative has brought has truly been an experience from the organizer's point of view. So we have with us this morning Mr. Michael Adrian Binon, the representative of the Community Pantry Philippines and also sister of Ana Patricia Non. The group now helps inspire, grow, and sustain community pantries in the country, and is inspired by the first one that is actually found here in Quezon City and Maginhawa. So may I now on the floor, Mr. Michael Adrian Non.
And magandang umaga sa ating lahat. So
magandang umaga.
And ako ulit si Michael Non. Ako ay kapatid ni Patreng na nagsimula ng Maginhawa Community Pantry. Siguro, gusto ko muna pasalamatan lahat yung uma-attend din sa webinar na ito. Napakaganda ditong webinar na ito to address yung para talakayin ng food security at kung paano pwedeng makatulong siguro yung government at yung private sector sa ganito klase initiative. Ang mga aral ng community pantry ay kasi bago ito even us never pa namin ginawa ito. Yung mga aral ng community pantry para nakuha namin siya sa praktika kung paano namin sa araw-araw namin na operation na nagbubukas ng pantry at nagpapadala ng tulong sa karating pantry at kung saan pa. So dito, mas mainam na talakayin ko siguro yung kung ano yung mga aral na ito. Sa pagkwento rin siguro kung sa mula nagsimula ang pantry patungo hanggang ngayon. Kasi dito, sa course siguro na mahigit isang buwan, actually 5 weeks na existence community pantry, dito namin nakita yung mga solusyon na nakuha namin, ay nakuha rin namin sa mga problema na nag-a-arise dun sa paglawak. So simulan ko muna sa unang-una. So bago yung community bago yung magsimula si Patreng sa Maginhawa Community Pantry, totoo yung sinasabi kanina Sir Nono, karoon ng second lockdown kasi specialized sector. At si Patreng, kung saan siya nakatira, sa barangay niya, nagkaroon sila ng lockdown dun sa barangay. At nagkaroon sila ng lockdown, ang pinakamalaking pagdagot dito ay medyo mahigpit actually yung pagpapa-implement ko. To the point na parang sinasabi na even yung food riders is not allowed. Although, of course, it was clarified later on na pwede naman. Pero problema ni Patricia nung panahon, siya kasi ay merong maliit na furniture business. At meron siya mga gawa doon na parang na nakasalalay pa rin ng kanilang kabuhayan doon sa business na yun. So, nung nangyari yun, 2 weeks, 3 weeks yung lockdown na yun, ang unang problema, pinag-uusap kami mga kakapatid kaibigan doon. Ang unang problema is paano masisigurado makakain sa Patreng. So, dito, syempre, na kami ng tulong at pera para makagrocery ng pagkain, etc. Now, ang problema, dun sa course of 3 weeks na yun, yung message halos araw-araw yung mga kasama ni Patreng sa kanyang trabaho, na nahihirapan silang i-sustain ang kanilang sarili at ang kanilang pamilya. So itong klase ng at si Patreng, habang nasa bahay siya during the lockdown, ang naman sa kanya ay medyo parang sobra-sobra yung meron sa kanya. Kaya mabuhay araw-araw at kahit matapos yung lockdown, meron pa rin siya sobra. At dito nagsimula yung konsepto ng community pantry. Na habang ako, na meron akong actually hindi man sobra-sobra yun, parang may ilang dilata, ilang kilo, ilang extra na kilo ng bigas, ilang mga dried goods, etc. Prutas. Ano yung pwede niya magawa sa isang bilang individual? So dito, ginawa niya doon, kinuha niya nga yung cart niya, nilagay niya doon sa Maginhawa kasi yung pinakamabisi doon na street sa malapit sa kanya. At yun yan, sinimula yung pantry. Ang buti talaga yung konsepto dito ay affected tayo lahat, pero kailangan natin magtulungan. Yung nilagay niyo una-una doon, actually mga ilang dilata lang, ilang pirasong dilata, ilang kilo ng bigas, ilang ano. At yung buo talaga dito ito ay mutual aid, hindi charity. Lahat tayo apektado at kailangan natin lahat magtulungan. Alam namin nung mga nakaraan pa na mahirap ang tama ng pandemya sa lahat ng pamilyang Pilipino. Marami na walang trabaho, marami walang makain. Pero yung figures actually, yung mga data sa limbawa, nilalabas sa DOH na 60% ng pamilyang Pilipino ay para nakaranas ng gutom hanggang sa matinding gutom. Sa numero, alam mo yun. Pero ano yung extent nung ganung klase ng problema sa physical, sa realidad, yun yung hindi pa namin na-realize until nagsimula yung pantry. So ayun, nag-start na yung pantry at medyo malaki agad siya. Karoon siya media attention at eventually na-replicate siya. Ang unang problema namin ay 3 days into the community pantry, that started Thursday, now it's Saturday, is ang dami-dami ng community pantry. Dumadami ng community pantry, ano yung pwede natin magawa para makapagtulungan namin within community pantry? At dito nagsimula yung pag-create namin ng database. So dito sa database, una namin ginawa, actually nung una ito ay open system. Na parang lahat yung database ito is accessible to everyone, anyone can input, anyone can edit. So para siyang open source. At from then on, nagkaroon na kami ng database. At the onset, bigla yung day nung unang araw nagkaroon ng inopen namin database, nagkaroon kami ng 37 entries. Kinabukasan meron agad 250 entries. Then the following day meron agad 500 entries. So mabilis sumalawak yung pantries. At dumating soon yung pangalawang problema. Tinatanong ng mga tao, kadalasan yung mga tao, pupunta lang sila dun sa mga pantries na alam nila, which is actually Maginhawa lang. Kaya ang haba-haba ng pila sa Maginhawa. At the same time, yung mga donors, nagdodonate lang sila dun sa mga pantry na alam nila at kadalasan Maginhawa lang din yung pinag-donate nila. So dito namin naisip, okay, may database na tayo, gawin natin public na itong database, pero hindi pa rin mahanap ng mga tao sa ito. So dito rin, yung mga tao rin, nagkaroon din ng mga volunteer na mappers na minapa ang ginawa naman, trabaho naman nila sa lahat ng mga ng input na data entry dun sa database namin. Minapa pa nila sa Google Maps, pero pa eventually, GitHub, ginamit rin yung GitHub para magkaroon ng mapa dito. Ang objective ay una, para malaman ng tao kung saan ba sila pwede pumunta na pinakamalapit sa kanila, Pangalawa, para sa nais mag-donate, makita rin nila kung saan sila pinaka-malapit na pantry pwede mag-donate. In kind man yan or cash. Kasi nandun na yung details nakalagay rin doon yung details para sa cash donations. Na pumasok pa yung susunod na, nung dumalabot na siya at dumadami na sa bawat LGU, dito na naman pumasok ang problema. Sa response actually ito ng LGU. Kasi kung hindi ako nagkakamali, medyo nagulat rin na maraming LGU dito. Paano natin i-handle ang community pantry? Maraming LGU actually na very negative na para sabi kailangan yung permit, kailangan yung sumunod sa health protocol, may nag-threaten pa nakakasuhan namin kayo, etc. etc. Ang best practice actually dito is parang sa experience namin kay Mayor Choi sa Quezon City. Kasi at the onset pa lang, nung parang tinag siya ni Patricia sa isang post na nagkakaroon na ng problema in terms of harassment sa mga community pantry organizers sa Quezon City, ang response agad ni Mayor Choi, katulad na sinabing ni Sir Nono, is nakapag-arrange agad ng meeting para dun sa mga community pantry organizers, inassure sila na hindi kailangan ng permit at nag-vouch na para tutulungan sa lahat ng mga pwedeng i-require dun sa mismong pantry. Pag-ensure pa yan ng health protocol, ng pila, pag-repacking man, paghanap ng mas suitable na location, etc. etc. So lahat yun ay napakalaking tulong. At ito actually yung nagiging daan para mabigay mo dun sa ibang mga LGU kapag merong ganitong kinakaharap na problema sa LGU, yung ibang community pantries. Itong practice rin sa Quezon City ang pinibigay namin sa kanila. Kesa gawin nyo ito, bakit hindi nyo bayahin na ginagawa halimbawa sa QC? Na instead na parang further irregulate, bakit hindi nyo na lang tulungan? Same din sa paglalabas ng guidelines, bakit hindi natin gayahin ginawa sa QC na sinasabi na parang, of course, may kalayaan ang mga community pantries na mag-operate kasi tulong naman talaga, nasa karapatan nyo rin naman tumulong. Pero paano natin maiiwasan yung mga iba't ibang aberya na pwede natin mapaharap? Lalong-lalo na tayo pa rin na nasa totong pandemya. So yun yung that was week 2. Pumasok naman ngayon yung susunod na problema. Maabot na ng 1,000. 2 weeks into, maabot na ng 1,000 ang community pantries. Ang problema dito is, una kasi, nung individual, mga ilan pa lang yan, mga 5 hanggang 10 pa lang sa isang area. Ang problema lang dito is parang kung yung sobra, para ipapadala, padilyan yun. Pero halimbawa sa Quezon City na may 170 plus ka na community pantries, paano mo susunod itong klase natin? At dito pumasok na, saan kayo dito pumasok yung solution na bakit hindi tayo maghanap ng kumuha ng foods diretso sa source, sa farmers at sa mga cooperatives. At dito nagkaroon pa ng pangalawang database. At yung database naman ito ay database sa lahat ng mga pwedeng contact na NGOs o kaya cooperatives or farmers na pwedeng pagbilhan ng bulk ng community pantry. Sa tingin namin, malaking tulong ito para makapagbigay ng mas maraming volume ng goods sa mga taong nangangailangan sa mga pumipila sa community pantry. At the same time, malaking tulong rin ito kasi umuugong rin yung balita at matagal lang umuugong yung balita ng spoilage farmers. Walang bumibili ng gulay, walang bumibili ng kanilang mga produkto, nasisira lang. So dito, ang ginawa namin dito, nakipag-coordinate rin kami sa Department of Agriculture para tulungan rin kami doon sa paghanap na pwedeng source sa farm ng goods sa probinsya at kayo na rin para doon sa transportation. So medyo umano na siya, dumalawak na siya. Now, pumasok rin dito nung meron na kaming database na kami ng community pantries, meron na kaming mapa, yung mga pondo, yung mga pinakamarami na sa sentro is para lalong binibili directly dun sa producers, sa hub. At pumasok dito yung susunod na problema. Ang problema ng susunod dito ay kung ikaw yung set, kasi by that time, ang maginhawa community pantry ay na-convert na rin into a hub. Ibig sabihin, since para ma-disperse rin yung pila dun sa maginhawa, kasi umaabot na ng kilometro yung pila sa maginhawa, ang maginhawa community pantry, ang ginawa niya, since marami rin naman siya donation na ginagawa, naging siyang isang distribution hub. So ang trabaho ng distribution hub ay wala siyang pila doon, pero ang trabaho niya, lahat ng karatid na community pantry ay bibigyan niya ng tulong ng parang ambag dun sa mga pantry nila para ma-disperse ang pila, at the same time, ma-disperse rin yung donation sa marami. At the same time, nagkaroon ng central hub. Ang central hub ay sa Claret. Maraming salamat sa mga pari at sa administrasyon ng Claret na nagbigay ng sa kanila. In-offer nila yung storage, yung parang storage facility nila, mga volunteers sila for repacking. So yung central hub. At yung central hub, by that time, actually, nag-supply na siya sa mahigit 100 community pantries. At dito papasok ang susunod na problema. logistically, paano ka magdi-distribute at magko-coordinate? Ilan lang yung volunteers dito. Paano kung may isa o dalawang tao ka lang na nag-volunteer para sa coordination with community pantries, how can you distribute 225 pantries flawlessly? So masyado mahirap yun for coordination kasi iba diyang galing pa sa probinsya, galing Laguna, galing Rizal, galing Bulacan. So dito pumasok yung susunod na advancement ulit na meron pa, of course, meron pang central hub, pero bakit hindi mo rin i-cluster yung mga area? For example, if marami ng pantries dun sa Caloocan, why don't you make a hub in there? Doon sa Caloocan para lahat ng coordination, naiipon lamang dun sa mga hubs. If kailangan mag-transport ng groups, you coordinate with the hubs so that the hubs will coordinate doon sa mga pantries na malapit sa kanila. At yun yung susunod. So right now, meron kaming hub sa, if I'm not mistaken, meron kaming hub sa Bulacan, sa Pasig, sa Marikina, sa Taytay, Cainta, kasi simula lang, Caloocan, etc. So ito yung susunod na naging problema. Yung problema na hindi na walang solusyon. Matapos dito, yung clause dito rin na actually na-streamline yung pag-report ng kaso. Kasi dati, noong una, lahat ng kaso, halimbawa, may harassment from law enforcers, may problema with LGU, may problema sa, actually dun sa community kapag may problem sila dun sa mga neighbors or whatever. Lahat ng problema to individually sinasentro lang dun sa chat group. Actually, chat group lang kami na. Chat group. At dito mahirap rin yung tracking nito. Kasi kung marami kang issues dito sa likod ito, ang problema mo dito, although meron ka mga nag-volunteer na mga lawyers para dun sa tumulong dun sa mga cases na ganito, masyado pa rin siyang scattered. So dito nakatulong rin sa pag-aayos ng sistema yung mga hubs na ito kung saan nagkakaroon ng point person na sa isang locality, for example, sa Caloocan, may point person doon, pinag-report na ng lahat ng kaso, halimbawa ng harassment, at yun yung nag-pitch doon sa kung sino man yung kinakailangan. Dun sa volunteer group, kung sino yung lawyer na pwede pupunta. So ito rin yun. So yung pag-streamline rin ng pag-streamline rito ng communication. Kasi kesa scattered, at least ito medyo controlled. At dito, yung moving forward, right now, ang community pantries, ang recorded namin na number na community, although sinabi ng DILG na sa 6,700 yung community pantries, understand na parang ang registered lang sa amin is 1,894 as of today. Meron kasi mga community pantries which was lalo na yung mga initiated ng simbahan, iba ng even mga nasa mga tao sa gobyerno. Ang pollution natin ay marami na rin nagbukas community pantries sa mga kaibigan natin mula sa Bureau of Fire, even yung ibang LGUs actually nagbubukas ng community na parang food banks sila. Yung mga yun ay wala sa database namin. So yung sa 1,994 na community pantries meron sa ngayon, ano ngayon yung kinakaharap na problema present? We know from the start na magkakaroon dito ng parang, kasi pinag-usapan natin dito sustainability. We know for a fact, eventually magkakaroon dito ng donors fatigue. Kumbaga, na parang nung sikat siya at nung sobrang ugo, sobrang dami ng donasyon, pero eventually, pakonti ito na pakonti. At dito papasok rin siguro yung importansya ng pagtulungan rin sa iba pang mga organisasyon. Kasi from before, it's individual efforts, iba't ibang maliliit na individual efforts. At dito, ngayon, moving forward, paano mo siya masusustain? Ang isang magandang solusyon na namin is parang open kami for partnership rin doon sa mga NGOs na nais tumulong. Halimbawa, sila ay may connect halimbawa sa mga kumpanya na pwede magkaroon ng monthly pledges doon sa community pantries o kaya monthly pledges dun sa central hub, yun ay ina-accept namin. Kasi ang problema rito, kung aasa lang tayo, kung ang mode talaga natin dito ay parang sustainability no long run. At aasa tayo halimbawa dun sa kung kailan lamang merong gustong mag-donate, medyo mahirap yun. Maraming pantries ang magkasaroon sa ganung klase ng sistema, lalong-lalo na babot ng isang linggo, 2 linggo ng donasyon. Siyempre may hirapan kang sustain. Lalong-lalo na kung individual ka lang, marami ng patron ng community. So dito, yung ilang solusyon na iisip sa ngayon, yung iba dito ay meron ng ilang hakbang para i-sustain. Pero meron dito mga hindi pa rin fully na-utilize. So yung una, yung pag-open na rin ng, yung central hub ang ginagawa niya dito, yung ati kasi namin ay nasa States, nag-open ng communication with organizations sa ibang bansa para mag-solicit ng support for community pantries here. At yung nasusolicit na pera na yun, yung binibili namin ng mga puleto na ladang gulay kada linggo para i-distribute sa iba't ibang mga pantries. Yung pangalawa dito, yung iba ay nanghihingi ng dun sa mga businesses na sa locality nila. Ang ginagawa rin ng ibang dito, clusters dito is parang they ask for pledges from the system. For example, every month kaya mo ba magbigay, kung ano man yung kaya mo ibigay, maaari mo magbigay. Para sigurado ka lang na every month or every week, meron po pasok na pondo at kaya niyo masustain yung pagbibigay ng tulong sa mga tao. So yun yung dalawang bagay. Kumbaga, paghanap. So bali tatlo pala yun. Una, pakikipag-partner dun sa mga LGOs. At saka LGOs actually na maaari makatulong to sustain the pantries. Pangalawa, pag-tap ng mga resources na basta bansa natin para kung sakali ay maaari makapagbigay ng tulong rin sa pantries dito. At pangatlo, yung pag-tap dun sa mga local businesses para magbigay ng pledges dun sa pantry para maging sustain, at least para masigurado na mga susunod na buwan, magtutuloy-tuloy pa rin. So, yun. Yun yung meron sa community pantry ngayon. At kung sakali pala, kung ang ano namin dito is dun sa Community Pantry PH na group at sa Community Pantry PH na page, maaari nyo itong i-check actually yung mapa kung nasa ng lahat ng community pantries. At yung datos na nandito at yung mapa na meron dyan, hindi yan sa amin, hindi yan sa akin o sa kapatid o kay Patring o sa pamilya namin. Halos lahat ng effort sa Community Pantry PH ay effort ng community. Hindi siya parang walang isang prangkisa na merong may-ari ng lahat ng effort. Even yung mga solusyon, halimbawa, yung pag-create ng mapa, pag-create ng hub, pag-contact sa LGU, pag-coordinate dun sa hindi yan effort ng isang pantry na maginawa. Effort yan ng marami ng iba't ibang mga pantry at lahat ng sumusuporta dito. So yun. Yun yung, siguro yun lang masasabi ko. Kung meron bang gustong ginawin pa, siguro sa tanong, so yun na mamaya. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat, Michael Nong. Siguro, yun yung talagang magandang makita dito sa inisyatibo natin sa community pantry dito sa Pilipinas. We can call it as a collective effort for good. Some few things that I caught during your sharing. Ito ay isang open source initiative. It is open source. Everyone can actually collaborate and engage towards this kinds of partnership. One, with the local government. Two, with the public sector. And three, with civil society. And even for the private sector. And steps for sustainability include ensuring partnerships continue. To avoid donor fatigue, we should tap resources and tap for businesses. And I think this is the kind of partnership that some of our audience members are looking towards here kung meron tayong ibang nag-start din ng sarili nilang community pantries. So thank you very much again, Michael, for sharing that inspiring story on how this effort has borne fruit in just the past month. Okay, so before we move on to actually our final portion, we actually have a short audio-visual presentation that we have for everyone here. It's a bit of a documentation of what we've had so far for the community pantry story. And I think this might inspire us all to see better how community pantries, the local government, even the private sector is moving towards food security. Again, for those who just joined in, this is Community for Food Security Partnerships Against Hunger. So let's now all watch this short video.
Magandang araw po. Ako po si Ninita Reyes, organizer ng 4-piece Pabahay Phase 1 Community Pantry dito sa Pabahay 2000 CSJDM Bulacan. Bali magpo 1 month na rin po kami na nagpo-community pantry. So na-inspired po kami dun sa ginawa ng Maginhawa Community Pantry. Kaya kami po ng CSJDM Unity Walk Team ay nagplano na magsagawa nitong community pantry.
Sa aming ginawang community pantry, Guardians to Guardians, ito po'y binuo namin bilang organizer ng aming MLKS, GBFII. At sa community pantry po ng Maginhawa, si Patricia noon po, maraming salamat. Siya po ang nag-operasyon sa pantry na ito.
Magandang araw po. Kami po ang kaisa ka Area 17, Community Pantry ng UP Campus. Ako si Jenlyn Ibarra at ako din si Maria Siloy. Ang kaisa ka Area 17, Community Pantry ay inisyatiba namin mga kababaihan nakatira sa Area 17. Bilang mga babae at ina, nais naming maibsan ang kalam ng sikmura ng bawat mamamayang nagugutom, lalo na ang mga batang nangangailangan ng pagkain at nutrisyon sa panahon ng pandemya at kawalan ng trabaho ng marami.
Hello po, ako po si Hannah.
Hannah, I'm Zai.
And we're both from Malinis 6 Community Pantry. Actually, it started sa isa sa mga lumabas na balita, which is yung Maginhawa Community Pantry.
Yeah.
At syempre, na-inspire kami na gawin yun sa loob ng Malinis 6. And we did not expect din na biglang dadami yung magdodonate at maraming interested na tumulong.
I reached out to her na baka pwede kami mag-collab na para mabuo ang pantry na to. Na sabi niya, tinanong niya ako kung pwede bang magkaroon ng venue. Then sinabi ko pwede sa simbahan. And yung a bunch of volunteers, syempre nakapag-produce din tayo ng mga youth dito sa ating simbahan.
Noong una, sabi namin may tutugon kaya sa kapag in-start namin ito. Pero yung mga co-leaders ko, nagbigay sila kaagad. Kaya naumpisan po namin ang community pantry ng agaran. Yung mga goods na nandito sa aming mga pantry, palagi naman pong may nagbibigay, and every time po na may marireceive kami, pinamimili ko po agad ng mga gulay para kahit na konti araw-araw, meron kaming nabibigyang pamilya, meron kaming naitatawid sa bawat araw.
Araw-araw po natin tinitinan ang aming urban garden po. Ito po siya. Araw-araw po kami halos nag-harvest po para pandagdag din po.
Sa lahat ng tumulong sa amin dito, lahat po ng inyong binigay na tulong, pinaabot po namin, door to door po ito. Hindi namin pinapapila ang bawat tao para maiwasan po namin ang pandemya na ito dahil sa protocol po, sinusunod po namin.
Rest assured naman sa lahat na provided yung alcohol, thermal scanner upon entering the pantry. Tapos required kaming lahat na volunteers mag-face mask. And syempre nililimitahan din namin yung mga pumipila, which is nung unang wave ay nasa 200 lang yung kaya namin i-accommodate para rin maiwasan yung congestion sa labas ng pantry. So, bukod doon, syempre yung barangay.
Yeah, thanks to Barangay Molino 6 sa pagtulong nila sa pagpapadala ng mga tanod para ma-maintain ang social distancing. And syempre sa volunteers na tumutulong din sa mga tanod, ang tinatawag natin mga marshal.
Mga walang-wala po talaga, nakakatulong ito lalo sa pang-araw-araw na gastos ito ay nakakatulong sa isang pamilya at sa isang araw mayroon silang pang-ulam, mayroon silang bigas.
Magpapasalamat po ako sa mga guardian na nagbibigay dito sa amin ngayon. Laking tulong po sa amin kasi kulang na kulang po talaga kami ng pagkain. Dahil mula nung nasalanta kami ng Ulysses, wala pa kayo kaming makuhaan ng masyadong pambili ng pagkain.
Ako po ay nagpapasalamat sa mga nagbibigay ng tulong sa amin. Dahil ito ay isang malaking tulong din sa aming kahirapan dahil pandemic itong taon at kami po ay isang biktima sa Ulysses nung nakaraan. At hanggang ngayon po nandyan pa kami sa covered court area na saan kami po nag-evacuate.
Malaking tulong sa mga hinihirap.
Ilan po kayo sa bahay?
4 po.
Lahat po may hanap buhay, kamusta po?
Ay, wala po. Walang trabaho mister ko ngayon, bisa ng pandemic na nawalan siya ng trabaho. Malaking bagay ito, malaking tulong sa mga kapwa natin may hirap. Maraming salamat po sa tulong niyo.
Talagang mahirap. Wala akong trabaho. Kapag senior citizen pa kami yun. Nilalawa lang kami mag-asawa. Pero pinap kami talaga ngayon ano. Kaya nagtagya na ako dito eh. Baka magkain lang kahit kunti.
Na may lumaganap pa po ang bibigayan, pag-sharing and giving po ng bawat isa po para marami pa po tayong matulungan po ng mga maralitang mamayan po.
Lahat po, maraming salamat. Iba-ibang pangsyon man po, nagtulong-tulong dito sama-sama lahat. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you for that inspiring and very transformational video that we just saw. I think the entire growth of this phenomenon and this movement, actually, to say the least, has allowed more and more people to join us. At ito nga siguro yung hinahanap natin na community for food partnerships, hindi lamang sa lungsod Quezon, but also throughout the country. And I think this is exactly the kind of partnerships that we look for and the kind of partnerships that is behind a transformational and more progressive society that we can look forward to. So moving on for this morning, to actually link government and maybe private sector and react a bit on how civil society has continued to have a very important role in food systems and food security. We're very, very honored to actually have members from the World Food Program of the United Nations. First off, we have Miss Brenda Barton, wherein she is our country director in the Philippines. And only last February, after leading World Food Program Sri Lanka country since October 2016. She has laurels of over 30 years of tenure with the World Food Program and brings in extensive experience in the broad field of food security, nutrition, and food systems with a background in communications, partnerships, and resource mobilization. Also with us today is Dr. Martin Pareno, who is also part of the World Food Program as the program's officer also. He has 14 years of experience in the area of public health, food security and nutrition, and social safety nets, both in development and emergency contexts. He started his career under the Department of Health's Doctors to the Barrios program that deploys young doctors to underserved communities in the country. He also served as Nutrition Action Officer on top of his responsibility as an island physician. Later, he moved to the Department of Health Emergency Management Bureau and then the Action Against Hunger International, which is a Spanish international NGO that works on health, food security, and nutrition, and is now currently the Program Policy Officer of the United Nations World Food Program Philippines. Again, welcome Ms. Dr. Brenda Barton and Mr. Martin Pareno.
Thank you very much and good morning, colleagues.
Good morning, Brenda.
Good morning. As you can hear, I have a very esteemed and well-experienced colleague with me today, and I thought it would be appropriate, since I'm the newbie still, having been only in the Philippines for 3 months, to have him join. We've been talking quite a bit since my arrival about the food and nutrition security in the country, and a little bit differently, I would say, than in many countries. But this is now a new thing because of COVID. We are indeed looking at more urban food security problems than ever before. As you heard, I came from Sri Lanka, and we also there experienced severe lockdowns, a little bit differently than the Philippines. Sri Lanka didn't have any e-commerce. They were totally unprepared. But I saw that yet again there, the community stepped in and they organized themselves and they brought in food trucks and they just mobilized like you all are doing here. And I think that is really the essence of food insecurity response. And this comes from an agency like the World Food Program that is the largest humanitarian food agency in the world. So perhaps I could just go to the next slide and just give you a quick walkthrough about who we are. I've just actually myself come back from Cotabato. I was keen to go out to see our work in the Barm area, which is an active area where we've been engaging since 2006. In fact, it was the reason why the World Food Program came back to the Philippines, was because of the need to contribute to food and nutrition security, and especially to contribute to peace. So that was a very enlightening trip, and I saw, all sorts of interesting things with the indigenous populations, but also the former combatants or soon to be decommissioned combatants working together on farming projects and the social cohesion that can create. So these are programs that we're looking forward to fostering further. Let's go a bit further now. The next one. So indeed, the Philippines is a middle income country, as you all know, and this makes the challenges I find, especially now, very, very challenging, because there are many countries that traditionally provide assistance to the World Food Program, which are governments. So the United States is the number one, then we have the European Union, Japan, etc. They are our traditional partners. And they're kind of in this situation where they say, well, these are middle income countries, certainly they can cope, right? They have governments, they have budgets. It's a matter of prioritizing the resources in the right spot. And we, at the other hand, are here on the ground with you all, and we try to study. Martin will give a bit of information on a study that we did in Quezon City, and we're really trying to grasp what the magnitude is of the hunger and the nutrition problem. And this can be a little bit invisible, especially when it comes to nutrition. So we have to try to articulate it. One of the things I found just recently, last week, I was at a launch of a program that we're doing with DICT. And there was a person that came up to me that works for DICT. And he said, I've been a volunteer in Quezon City for the last 7 years. We run a soup kitchen. And he said, it's really, really getting desperate. And he said, is there any way you can help us? And he said, because the normal providers of assistance, which are the private sector, they're struggling themselves. They're not able to step up. So I asked him a question. I said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, what was it like before the COVID crisis? And what would it be like now? Because I felt it was helpful for me to get a bit of a finger on the pulse. And he said, before the COVID crisis, let's say the numbers of people that were coming up and the gravity of need in the community was about 3 out of 10. He said now it's about 7 or 8 out of 10. And for me, that was quite telling. So I certainly have been so impressed to see the rise of the community spirit and the community pantries coming up, because you all are there on the ground and you're seeing what the needs are. Perhaps we could just go to the next slide. Thanks. If we could just flip to the next slide. Thank you. So this is just really a sort of a snapshot of WP's work in the Philippines. I mean, we are, of course, known to be a humanitarian agency, a life-saving agency. We're here in times of earthquakes and floods and all sorts of natural disasters. But we really try to focus more on the anticipatory emergency side, the preparedness side, to mitigate the shocks and then reduce the impact of people's livelihoods. So, of course, we were very concerned what happened last year during the typhoons at the end of the year, and how that added on to people's food security. And indeed, the government asked us to come in and intervene with some cash handouts. And in those cases, we try to target, well, we do target the most vulnerable people in the community, because we can't give additional assistance to everyone. So there are a whole bunch of initiatives in that regard. And then we're capacity building, of course, with the government. And you mentioned school meals earlier on. That's one of my passions. And I think it's an area that Dr. Martin and I, and he'll speak more about, have been really discussing with the government, because we found as WFP that school meals is one of the best social safety nets that you can provide. And indeed, most of the countries around the world that have been coping the best with COVID are those countries that have strong social safety net programs. In some cases, what we're also seeing is that some countries have many social safety net programs, and I think this is one. The question is, how well are they coordinated together? And do we really have a roadmap of who is getting what package and then who's left out? And this is, again, an area of capacity building that we've been talking to the government about, how we can assist with some of our beneficiary targeting and monitoring and registration systems. Social behavior change communication, I think, is another interesting area that Martin will talk about. And you mentioned Capsec Nogrellis and the Zero Hunger Task Force. Absolutely. He's been a real leader in many of these initiatives, of course, engaging with the private sector, which is essential. WFP is the secretariat for something that's called the Sun Business Network, which was formed last February and brings the private sector and government partners together to look at hunger solutions. There was a mention about the Food System Summit this year. Indeed, there is going to be a major food system summit in July of this year, a pre-summit in Rome. And then in September of this year is going to be the major global summit. And this is quite interesting. And Secretary Dar is the national convener. I believe that it was announced off the back of last week's Food Security Summit that was already going on in the country, that they're now going to pivot to discussing food and nutrition security as what I would kind of call really like it's farm to fork. It's instead of looking at things in a vertical way, like focusing on agriculture production or looking at post-harvest loss or waste, looking at all the pieces in a vertical mode and then maybe leaving some of them off. It's to really look at what does it take to have safe and healthy and affordable food on our table, and what are the broken pieces in the system. So FAO, you mentioned earlier, and WFP and other agencies were working with the government to try to foster dialogues amongst, we really call it a people's summit, amongst groups like yourself to really hear what are the problems, what are the broken pieces, and to try to bring up consensus on what are some of the solutions that need to be to be provided. So you'll be hearing a lot more about the Food Systems Summit over the next few months. Let's go to the last slide, and then I'm going to turn it to you, Doc Martin. Yeah, so this is just a real snapshot again of what WP is doing in the country, as I described earlier. I think that's the last slide. So Doc Martin, let me go over to you to give now more the grist of your perspective and your experience here in the Philippines. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Brenda, and also to the organizers of this call. And we are very happy that you've invited us also to maybe give you some glimpse also of what's happening now in the Philippines, how the development partners like the World Food Program is helping out the government solve some of these issues, because definitely, as mentioned by our country director, Ms. Brenda Barton, we are actually the armed side of the United Nations working on food security and nutrition, and not only on emergency context, but also during the development. And also I'm bringing with us today my experience previously working with the local government unit, and then with some perspective from the NGO work I had, and now with the United Nations. But maybe allow me to share some few slides here based from our findings from the study that we did actually for Quezon City. And this one is quite early in its stage because it's still undergoing some further analysis. But this study is entitled Food Security and Nutrition in Urban Philippines, Evidence from a Remote COVID-19 Survey. And this is a collaboration together with the Food and Agriculture Office and the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF. So the purpose of which actually is to look at the impact of COVID-19 on the livelihood and income of the households, particularly in Quezon City, the maternal and child diet and health, as well as the government programs. So allow me to just provide you some few glimpses of the result of the study. The first one, when you look at the household income, a household with moderate or severe food insecurity is already about 63%. This slide would show you the prevalence of the indicators during the COVID-19, and this was done actually in October, November, December in 2020. The orange bars are the result of the study, and the one in blue is the benchmark. Unfortunately, there's only one benchmark that we're able to find out, and that is the households who reported being worried about food in the last month. So most of these information in orange are new because of the COVID-19. So you will see that a lot of households, more than 50% of them, are affected, particularly in their food security. And then most of them are using emergency coping strategies at 80%. When we say coping strategies, these are things like having debt or borrowing money or food from the neighbors or other friends just for you to survive the days. It's quite not really good, to say the least. And some of them are taking loans. Imagine, it's 73%. But looking again at it, because almost 45% of the people lost their jobs because of COVID-19 due to retrenchment. At the same time, inavailability of transport mechanism for them to go to their work. And then 72% are in extreme poverty. When you look at households who reported being worried about food in the last month, you can see there that there's a big jump from 50.3%, which is the baseline, now to 87.1%. So what's the indication of this? If this situation will continue and nothing will be done from our end, from the partners, from the works of the likes of you, from the United Nations World Food Program and other development partners, definitely most of these people will just succumb to further hunger, malnutrition, and eventually death. And most of them are using negative coping strategy. The second slide is just telling you about the main findings. So it has really exacerbated the poverty in an already vulnerable population down there in Quezon City. The households in extreme poverty were the most severely impacted by the COVID-19. So there's no question on that, but it's just to confirm that indeed they're the most vulnerable people affected by this catastrophe. The third one is the households in extreme poverty reported more concerns due to COVID-19 in terms of food shortage. Definitely, because they don't have food prior to the COVID-19 already, much more now that they don't have means in terms of accessing both physically and economically. 87% of the households used some form of coping strategy in terms of COVID-19. Now, the other slide that I'm presenting to you is the impact of COVID-19 on maternal diet. You can see here that only a few women are consuming at least 5 out of 10 food groups. So this is a new idea because when we look at food, we always thought about the 3 food groups, the go, grow, and glow. But little did we know that we really need to unpack that a little bit in order for us to ensure that women, particularly the pregnant lactating women, are eating the right amount of food in terms of quality and quantity, because they are the source of life. They are the ones who bear children. And if mothers are malnourished at the beginning, during the pregnancy up to the lactation period, definitely they will bear children who are underweight, who are low birth weight, and eventually become more malnourished. And the vicious cycle of malnutrition, poverty will just continue to grow. Women who consume unhealthy foods, imagine that, based from the previous day or night, is about 15.1%. But this can even increase if we don't provide them with some support like social safety net programs and support coming from the well-meaning donors and small communities like what you're doing. Women who consumed any meat source the previous day is about 89.6%. I think it has something to do with what was provided by the social amelioration program, but this is not sustainable. Women who consume sugar-sweetened beverages the previous day is about 46.6%. So what does that mean? People now are just relying so much on sugary beverages just for them to address their energy needs. Say, for example, soft drinks and sweetened beverages like juice, because this is the only way for them to address their hunger. Women who consume no fruits or no vegetable is even at 40%. So imagine that. These are the foods that are supposedly free, low cost and available in the market, but nearly half of them are still not able to get that. And even the antenatal visit for pregnancy has decreased from 45% to 34%. So imagine they're not only not accessing the right quality of food, but even the health services from the health facilities. But the women with a birth in the past 5 years who took iron and folic acid I'm happy to say that it has even increased to 83%, mainly because I think the health facilities right now are quite heavily involved in providing all of those basic health services, despite the fact that they're on quarantine and having some restriction in terms of movement. On the young child feeding, you will see that there is a decrease in the exclusivity of breastfeeding at 41.6%, the one in green. The one in blue are still the benchmark. That is the year prior to COVID-19. When you look at children who started breastfeeding within 1 day of birth, it has increased from 82.6% to 94.8%. I think it has something to do with the thinking that mothers don't have money to buy formula milk, so they sorted out to breastfeeding. And this is actually a good attitude in the guise of the COVID-19, because what we want is for them to continue breastfeeding, because this is the most appropriate food, safe food for the child. And you don't need to buy infant formula for that. Instead of buying infant formula, you just use that money to buy other food for your family. Children who started breastfeeding within 1 hour has also increased from 55.6 to 85%. But look at the minimum diet diversity. It has decreased from 25% to 7.7%. And even the meal frequency, that means children are not only eating 3 times a day, but has decreased to maybe 1 time a day or 2 times a day. And it's quite it's not happy. I'm not happy to say that. Overall, the minimum acceptable diet has decreased from 14.6 to 6.6%. So imagine, these are the number of children. So meaning to say 6 out of 100 children are only meeting the minimum acceptable diet. So they are on the verge of dying because there's nothing we can do due to the insufficiency of food assistance to them. So even children who are not consuming vegetable and fruit is even high at 69%. So what I'm saying, what this slide is saying is that definitely there is a problem with regards to providing the physical and economic access to our children. And this is a call for our action, because this cannot be solved by the government alone. This should be holistic. This is whole of the government, whole of the nation. And everyone really has to provide and give his contribution and effort to solve this problem. Because this is not only Philippines which is the main concern. This is a whole world concern. And I think there are some other countries who are also experiencing worse than us. Only that in the Philippines is the hotspot for COVID-19 in the Southeast Asia. So I think those are the salient points I would like to share with you. And what I would like to say now is we need to collaborate, we need to work together, whether big or small, whatever it will be, that is very welcome. So Brenda, that's all from my end. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. You can all see why I thought that Dr. Martin should present today. We can share this presentation with you. As you can see, there's a lot more detail, but absolutely interventions such as urban gardens are really an important intervention, as well as anything else that can help to improve the quality of the diet and the affordability, as Martin was describing. So over to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin and Brenda, for that information and that data. Again, the work of WFP is something that the city constantly works with. I think earlier, Nonong just failed to mention, but we have also seen the results coming from that survey. And it's really, really something that we wanted to work with closely with everyone on board on the city, especially on how we can work on different aspects with social protections, because I think that is something indeed that we had to start with first before ensuring a longer term approach in terms of capacity building our efforts. Before we move on to our question and answer, I think it's just important for me to tie it up all on what Michael, what Nonong, and what Brenda and Dr. Pareño was able to share with us. And I think it's the connections that allow us to move forwards, not only at a national scale, but also that is present on a local level in terms of food systems. I don't know if that was strengthened earlier, but I remember Michael mentioning that the initiative of community pantries is actually open source, and this allows the collaboration from anyone to actually be part of. And then when Nonong mentioned that we're trying to be a holistic effort in the local government for food security, I think it's good to mention that when the partnership on the food hub in Maginhawa happened, that wasn't possible if discussions and actual collaborations took place in City Hall. I remember that meeting in the 14th floor. And all of this naman would be based on data that is provided also with agencies such as the World Food Program and our partnerships with UN-FAO and even UNICEF. As you mentioned earlier, we can see that we have around 63% who are experiencing moderate and severe food insecurity here in Quezon City, while 7% is at severe food insecurity. And given the numbers of Quezon City alone, which is a third of Metro Manila, I think it's very, very important to look at how that translates not only at the metropolitan level, but also in the national level. I think we have a few questions now coming in. Some have already been answered earlier by some of our speakers and reactors, but I think one of the first questions here on top, I think is addressed to that of the local government. Maybe the MMDA needs to appoint an overall community pantry czar, since local governments are busy with their own food security concerns, as well as the 2022 election campaign preparations may not be able to find time and energy to coordinate with each other. I think this might be directed to you, Nonong. Would you like to share a few insights on this?
Sorry, Ian. Can you repeat the question? I was answering one of the chats.
Yeah. Maybe the MMDA or the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority needs to appoint an overall community pantry czar, since local governments are busy with their own food security concerns, as well as the 2022 election.
Well, my perspective of this is that, number one, the scope of influence that we have is on the local government level. However, during this pandemic, one of the blessings is that the mayors are actually constantly in touch. Prior to the pandemic, they just do their own programs. Okay, but the pandemic has allowed regular meetings, and that's something we've been emphasizing, Ian. The Quezon City cannot just be satisfied with just producing food security just for Quezon City. We are the part of the Filipino race, and our commitment in Quezon City is to be the role model and the example, so that other agencies can follow. Together with Community Pantry, they started on their own, but if they see the spirit and the effect, then others should come in. Now, MMDA does come with a key role, and that's where maybe our national partners should be able to influence them in order to help. And the only thing that we can do as a local government is to show the way. And we do have partnerships with MMDA now in creation of our bike lanes, okay, in order to have better transport systems. So I believe it's something that should be explored. But at the same time, for now, what we can do is show the way and create those models.
Okay. I think Dr. Ko has something to say also about the matter.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian. I saw the question on the chat box, on the Q&A box. My initial thought on this as an academic and as someone who's working on public administration, the 21st century public administration allows for what we call networked governance. In other words, not everything begins from government, but we enable citizens as well to pitch their contributions to governance. And I think zeroing back on the community pantry, I think this is a wonderful occasion when citizens do step in, not to sidetrack, not to disregard or ignore the initiatives of local government, but to say that citizens themselves, in an organized manner, with their own free voluntary contribution, have much to contribute to, no matter how limited their resources are. And this is very heartwarming. This is very touching. In the case of poor people who have nothing but do actually contribute in any way they can. And this is exactly captured in the community pantry. So I think we should not, how do we say this? Put it aside, encourage citizens to help themselves, encourage citizens to contribute and complement whatever our local government units can do. Now, having to connect this on the issue of electoral exercise, which is not very far away, I think if we create czar, which is, I find it a little bit uncomfortable, not to use the word czar. I mean, somebody who is ruling, who is in charge. Of course, we say governance is about government, science, community, citizens as community pitching in. And therefore, we are all contributing to this food insecurity issue, particularly in COVID-19 pandemic. And therefore, I wouldn't say step aside community pantry, let the czar come in. I think we should hold hands. Let community work side by side with local government unit. And as I think Nonong said it, Quezon City government, well, its focus is on Quezon City, but it cannot go beyond the borders. But poverty, hunger, lack of food is everywhere in the country. And if we would take words from Brenda, it's all over the world. The pandemic is a global phenomenon. So citizens cannot just remain recipients of goodwill, of patronage, of being beneficiaries by contributions of government, and especially by those who are aiming to politicize the whole system of poverty. And so I think it's a good act on the part of Quezon City Mayor Joy for really putting a distance somehow. But the distance also enables local government to support what citizens can do. And I think that's a very comfortable distancing, if you may call it. Hindi lang pala social distancing dito. Political distancing is something that we can learn, and let citizens grow. Let citizens contribute. This is really the unselfish cooperation. This is really the spirit of community relations. This is the spirit of resilience, where community people are not beggars and are not recipients of politicos government aid all the time. No, it is about stepping up and holding hands and partnering. This to me is the 21st century interpretation of what we call networked governance. We are networked with each other, but we have something to contribute. Sorry for that long answer. It's almost a lecture. Thank you very much.
Edna, may I respond to that and react to that also? To address that question, maybe my suggestion is, instead of creating a czar, what we need are food security champions. And champions is limitless. It's a matter of understanding what really food security is about. And though Non and their group are talking about accessibility and availability, it has been pointed out by our friends in WFP that we have to factor in nutrition. So even prior to the pandemic, stunting is something so glaring that even on a school-based feeding, it's not enough. It's the first 1,000 days of life. And if only Filipinos can learn how to eat their own indigenous vegetables, those that they can grow right behind their backyards and in their community gardens, we can actually uplift. And to me, that's it. I think the recommendation is that let's not rely on one person. Let's create as many food security champions, educate them, capacitate them, and empower them. Because I think it is through empowerment by individuals or groups that we can truly achieve food security. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ko and Nonong. Again, I think that's the concept of engaged citizenship that is being portrayed about this entire initiative that is present and phenomenon now. Brenda mentioned that, agree, indeed, these are unprecedented times wherein governments nationally, internationally have never faced this kind of challenge before. And I think it's using that kind of opportunity to present this network governance that Edna was sharing with us and making it present all throughout. Mike, I think you wanted to share a bit something earlier there. Oh, okay. Another question that we have, okay, now this one's directed to you. The community pantry's growth is a phenomenon. Is there a move to form a formal organization for accountability and fiscal responsibility? And more importantly, sustainability. Kudos to the team.
Okay. Siguro, yeah, I'll answer that in siguro, several levels. Yung una siguro, with regards sa financial accountability, we're actually giving kits to pantry organizers on how they can document all the donations and how they can show yung receipts dun sa disbursement nila. As for dun sa amin rin, dun sa central hub, what we're doing is actually we're automating yung mga receipts from donations to purchase so that we can just export everything para magbalik and we do actually we do yung liquidation namin, we did that last week dun sa Montsari namin. And everyone who donated can actually request the liquidation, yung records from us. The second point is if we're planning to if there are talks na ba to make a formal organization from sa community pantry. Medyo mahirap iyon kasi first for us, for example sa family, we're doing this during our free time. Sa lahat ng spare time namin ginagawa, all of us have full-time jobs, so we cannot really, if we create another organization, halimbawa, make an NGO to focus on the development of community pantry, that would maybe be too tasking for us to do. Of course, there are volunteers. Second point is that our intention is not really to make an organization because we don't like the hierarchy of it. What we want is to actually create a culture. Yun nga, yung sinabi ko ni Doc Edna, as para magkaroon ng, this movement is para magkaroon para makapag-create ng bagong culture na, we don't need any organization to help. Lahat ng pwede natin magawa sa individual capacity o kaya economic capacity, pabili natin organization. And it also brings a problem kasi if we create an NGO out of it, then we're okay. The community ng community pantries is okay. Our relationships is okay because we treat each other as equal. Now, if we put hierarchy sa ganung klase ng baka mas mahirapan siya magkaroon sa who is accountable. Kasi right now we're accountable for everyone. We're responsible to everyone. If we put hierarchy, baka mag-iba yung dynamic, and we don't want that. As of now, naman if of course yung move na yun is maganda siguro para to systematize and all. But if at this point, if it's not beneficial dun sa the community kit that we have created, sa tingin ko hindi pa namin pupuntahan yung kasi hindi rin namin gusto na parang if you have an organization kasi lahat ng credit nandun na. Kasi dun sabi ko kanina, we're an open system. We don't take credit dun sa, none of us take credit dun sa lahat ng mga nangyari because hindi naman aabot kami sa punto na ito kung sakaling hindi rin ginawa na bawat isa yung ginawa nila for the past few weeks. So yun ang siguro.
Okay. Um, we have few minutes left, but I think I have one question for the group of Brenda and Dr. Pareno. I think the UN Food Systems Summit and the pre-summit is coming up in Rome sometime in June. If I'm not mistaken, since we're also in Quezon City as a local government, one of the action tracks that has been presented and proposed in the overall discussions for the Food Systems Summit is that you localize certain efforts on a city level or a metropolitan level. Do you have any insights that you can share to our viewers, especially those who are working as a community pantry organizer and maybe others who are part of the local government, on how we can bridge these efforts?
Perhaps I'll come in on that. I'm probably spending about 15% of my time right now on some of the initial organization of the Food Systems Summit. So to be honest with you, it's still taking shape here in the Philippines, but that's not unusual. It's also taking shape in many other countries. And again, frankly, it's because it's happening in a COVID context. On the other hand, now is the time we really see the fractures in our food systems with COVID throwing, everything it is at us. So we have to take really the best opportunity. For me, it's just helpful to hear from you, and for me and Martin, who also is really helping me present the issues to the organizing committee to bring those issues to the fore. Without a doubt, this is supposed to be a people summit. So it really is supposed to be about independent dialogues, about the voices of the communities and people like yourselves to say what it is that you need and where are you seeing the gaps in the food systems in your world. So let's just say it's at a very initial stage, but the idea is that indeed there are these 5 action tracks, and I'd be happy to send information afterward as you wish to kind of fill out how it's being organized. We had a very good summit, for example, a couple of weeks ago in Rome on indigenous populations, and the governor of Cotabato, Nancy, I was just with her 4 days ago. It was on indigenous peoples, and I was really happy to see the Philippines was there, as well as the former human rights rapporteur for indigenous populations, also from the Philippines, Vicky. So, where there's also different interventions happening outside of the Philippines, but where the Philippines can have a voice. And I feel that what you all are doing is a fantastic example. And I believe from my short time here, it's the Philippine spirit. No, it's a community spirit. It's a family spirit. I think it's a fantastic showcase as well for other countries to look at and to see and to learn from. So maybe Martin, do you have anything from your perspective you could add?
Yes, thank you, Brenda. Initiatives like this are very much welcome, because what we want really is that we have some kind of bottoms up and top down kind of initiative while we are discussing about it at a global level, but definitely there are some specificities which are very important, and I think very crucial to specific local government unit, because when you look at food insecurity and malnutrition, it's quite different according to the archipelago and according also to the local government unit. We have different types of leaders. We don't know what's in their mind. But I think initiatives like this, particularly initiated by the youth, is very important. It's a time now that we want to get involved the youth, to think about food security and malnutrition, because right now I think COVID-19 has really provided us with a great experience that really food as the major need of the people is really very important, and that's why we are seeing a lot of plantitos or plantitas. These are the advocates actually for household and community gardening, and we would like to use that opportunity to ensure that everyone in the community will have a steady access to affordable food that is also nutritious and could provide us with our daily need. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Brenda. We have 5 minutes left. Maybe this is good for some closing statements. If you have any recommendations or any valuable things that you were able to catch to all our speakers and reactors, maybe you have one sentence or one thing you want to say to and share to our viewers. Maybe we can start with Nonong, and then Michael, then Brenda.
Well, yes. As a parting thought to all that are here, and I believe many of those participating are the youth, and in the academe. I think now the COVID has given us an opportunity to rethink about food and how food is grown and how food is distributed. The Philippines was a powerhouse in agriculture, and yet it is a profession that we look down upon. And I think now with the consciousness that food is essential and food is the backbone of any first world country, we have to rethink and give a second look and appreciation and respect to our frontliners who are farmers. And in the Philippines, these are urban farmers. And the best way to respect them is to patronize their products. So by supporting community gardens, by buying them instead of getting imports. Of course, that's a debate because you can have food security by merely importing. But you know that in the Philippines, we have the capability to produce our own food. And that's where, again, those in the community pantry network, please support your local urban farms for the leafy vegetables, the ones that have nutrition for iron. But for those that are fruiting and root crops, then we can support our farmers from the countryside. So we are advocating the urban peri-urban model, okay, in order to create food security. And it's something that we have to learn and understand. The models are out there. But like any other model, we need to study it and apply it in our own context and utilize what is really innate in us. And I think one that is innate in us is that we have the Bayanihan spirit. And Filipinos love to eat. Okay? And therefore, let's produce what we want to eat, right? And learn and relearn that there are vegetables that we've forgotten. We have influence from the outside world. And yet there are nutritious, good and available food that doesn't need pesticide, a lot of care. But we need to learn that. And I think that's where WFP and even non as in the community pantry, we need influencers. We need people to show the way. We need people to show that, what is alugbati? What is malunggay? And how can we eat it more regularly, so that we can even start it on the onset of life, which is the first 1,000 days. And it's a lot harder because schools are available. Okay. However, and more organized, and it's much harder if it's on a community-based. But the community-based feeding and the community pantries and the like, this is where it starts. So again, I end up by saying, let's support food security. Let's understand what it is, and let's support local. Thank you.
Thank you, Nono. Michael?
From the end of the community pantry, actually we understand that what we do is not actually, we're barely scratching the surface of addressing food security. If anything, what we have accomplished here is to start a conversation for people to now talk about food security. Actually, what we hope for is that the conversation does not stop there. What the Bayanihan spirit, what the people can, each and everyone can provide. What we hope to actually accomplish here is for government and the citizens could talk about underlying concerns, issues about this, because if we don't address the other problems, because food insecurity is just a tail end of the problem. Hunger is a tail end of the problem. We have to, if we really, especially for the national government, if we really want to address the issue of poverty and hunger, we have to discuss a lot more, open topics that are sometimes uncomfortable for the people in government, for the people in corporations, to address what should be addressed to really, stop, put a stop to hunger, to end poverty. Because if we don't do this, community pantries, what we hope for is for community pantries to be, to not exist. Eventually it will wither away because it's not needed. People are secure; they have food on the table, they have jobs. But if we cannot solve these problems, if the government cannot, put their effort into the right place and really address the root causes of this problem, then lines will just get longer. Community pantries will still pop up. And eventually, we'll just go back to this vicious cycle. And I hope, this, if anything, I hope the community pantry movement is the start of something. It's not the end, but the start of, meaningful conversations on how to address the real problems that causes poverty and hunger. That's all.
Thank you, Michael. Brenda?
Thank you. It's been an absolutely enlightening conversation. And as you said, at first, this is the first step. And it's really helpful for me, new into my role, to meet people like yourself and just to hear the voices and see the personalities and the passion and the commitment that you all have, and helpful for Martin and I to see how we can be supportive. Just to turn a little bit of a twist on this, I feel a really strong sense of urgency. And perhaps it comes from my 30 years of working with WFP in many, many contexts, including in Africa, where it was often said, a hungry man is an angry man. And we know the nexus between food insecurity and conflict. Now, WFP was recognized last year with the Nobel Peace Prize. And so we're very much looking at the nexus points and understanding the depth of food being a pathway to peace. And the conflicts, by the way, don't always happen in, sort of typical war zones. I saw in Zimbabwe, bread riots. Things can spark up very, very quickly. So I just feel, again, a real sense of urgency, that both on the rural, where we have seen opportunity for actual increase in agricultural growth, but if people are producing food and it's not getting to the marketplace, then we have also distortion and issues there. So I don't need to tell you all that. Just let's all work together, and let's use, as we said, the opportunity of this challenge. Social behavioral change communication is something that WP has been piloting up in the Barham area, looking at how to understand the underlying issues and use the proper communications channels instead of telling people what to do, understanding why they're not, having certain behaviors, what are the true barriers, and how do we use this opportunity to also improve some of the practices at the same time. So thank you very much for inviting Martin and I to this session. I appreciate it, and best luck to you all.
Thank you very much to all our reactors and speakers. Again, it's continuing to work towards a community that is productive and self-reliant for the Filipino. So I think to just sum it up all a bit, our work on food security is actually starting the conversation, but making sure that we open those uncomfortable topics that we have to work on and really talk about. Because at the end of the day, a hungry person will become an angry person, and with that, chaos will be present. But in the end, it's trying to bridge all of these communities that are present so that we can actually not only inspire others, but have action towards it. So again, this has been Community for Food Security, Partnerships Against Hunger. We'd like to thank all of our panelists and reactors this morning. Your work inspires us to work for a better and more food secure community. Again, follow us at CIFAL Philippines and Quezon City Sustainable Development Affairs Unit and Grow QC. Hashtag Community for Food Security, hashtag Partnerships Against Hunger, and hashtag Grow QC. Again, it was a pleasure. I am Ian Agatep from the Quezon City Sustainable Development Affairs Unit. Thank you and good morning, everyone.